Feel the mat underneath you. Maybe if you happen to have been in practice yesterday, then we maybe feel a little bit of additional opening capacity across the shoulder girdle. And just find our way into a nice fluid cycle of respiration. This woman riding her bike home from a yoga practice. And she's feeling frazzled even after practice. And her time on the mat was spent distracted by things off the mat. She crosses this busy street that gives her some anxiety. When she gets about 3/4 of the way through the street, she feels a heaviness to her pedals. And then as she tries to ride her bike up the curb, she hears this horrible grinding and crunching sound. Metal against asphalt. Her bike comes to a standstill. She does a miraculous job not to fall, catches herself, gets off her bike and sees that the back tire is completely flat. She rides her bike a lot, so it's something she's accustomed to. Give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here, just to feel the mat against our body. And when it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees into a bent position if they're not already there. And make sure that your heels are kind of middle of the glutes. So heels and middle of the femur are lined up. And let's just lift ourselves into a little bridge, maybe 1 or 2 inches. Tailbone just separating from the mat or floor. And let's offer a little lateral sway here. Anchoring here is the shoulder girdle, is the scapula shelf. And we're thinking about lateral capacity of the lumbar. Maybe one more time to each side before we let the tailbone settle back towards that medial alignment and then drop the tailbone down to the mat. Pull your thighs in towards your torso and give yourself a nice little squeeze here. Tailbone can lift if that feels accessible to you or if that feels impactful for you. But you can also keep that lower body really anchored if that feels more impactful. And then let's keep the right thigh contracted and extend the left leg. Let the left heel just hover an inch or two off the mat. Hamstring can hover too. Quad is flexed here so that the upper and lower leg bones are operating as one unit. Want to have enough quad engagement that the leg is really just one piece. And then let's swap. So we'll bring the left knee in and extend the right. Just letting it hover. And keeping that quad engagement so that we have enough musculature engagement here to align the bone structure. And then let's retract the right leg when you feel balanced and give yourself another nice little squeeze. And let's release our feet back down to the mat. And then lift our belt line into a neutral bridge. So high enough here so that we create a singular angle from the shoulders off the knees. Hands can be by your side. They can be out at cactus or T, whatever feels appropriate for your shoulders. And then let's release the tailbone back down to the mat. Pull both thighs in towards the torso. Give yourself a nice little squeeze. Extend your right leg down the mat. And then retract your right leg. Extend your left leg down the mat. Retract your left leg. And now see if it's possible for you. It may not be. See if it's possible for you to extend both legs. Just feeling this elongation, this quad engagement, this glute engagement, this lower body awareness. Pull both thighs back in towards the torso. Give yourself a squeeze. Plant the feet on the mat. And we'll lift our belt line back into this neutral bridge. So we create this neutral plane. And then see if it's accessible for you to interlace your fingers underneath your shoulders here. It may not be accessible. If it's not, kind of the next step would be palms down. And then the next step would just be palms up at traditional width. So if you can interlace the fingers, wonderful. If not, go palms down. If that doesn't work, go palms up. And then if we have the finger interlace, you maybe can walk the shoulders a little bit closer together. And then we'll relax the hands, relax the tailbone, and just let the spine decompress here for a moment. Just feel this landing. So because she's experienced flat tires in the past, she has a little bike bag attached to the frame, and she goes in and she pulls out a tube and she gets it all set up. She takes the back tire off. She takes the chain off. She gets the flat tube pulled off of the wheel and the new tube put back on. And then she goes into her bike bag for a little tiny hand pump. And it's not in the bag. And it is at this moment that she completely loses it. Just tears start streaming down her face. They start splashing on the concrete sidewalk. And she just sits down and tucks her chin into her knees. And for as long as she can remember crying, she cries. Pull her thighs back in towards her torso. And then just let your knees fall to one direction or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate for you. And we'll press ourselves up into a seat. And through seat and into tabletop. And as we come into tabletop, spread your fingers out nice and wide. Craft that base position. Let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and roll back into down dog. Breathe into this depth. We'll come back down to tabletop. You get to tabletop, think about the finger splay once again, and then exhale out, round the middle of the back, tuck the chin, tuck the tailbone, and then give a little lateral sway through the middle of the rib cage, like you're trying to move the apex of the arch left to right. And then eventually we'll come back to neutral, curl our toes, lift our seat, and roll back into down dog. Breathe our way into some depth here. And then we'll come back down to hands and knees tabletop. Once again, think about splaying the fingers out as wide as you can get them. And then drop the belly, lift the tailbone, lift the chin. And then see what it feels like to sway the hips. Depending on how much space you have in your lumbar capacity. This could be way too much. So don't feel like you need to sway the hips here. Just see what it feels like to offer a sway of the hips. We think back to yesterday, if you happened to be in practice yesterday, and we did the kind of forward back movement in our extension articulation, just like today. We get that anterior awareness. See if you can feel some anterior abdominal musculature awakening. And then we'll come back to neutral. Lift the spine to neutral one more time. Curl our toes, lift our seat, and find down dog. Another time, maybe. I don't think one more time is appropriate because we're going to do that again. And then let's walk our way forward to the front of the mat. And as we get into our fold here, just find a half lift. Get that long neutral extension. And then exhale back into your fold. Lay your toes out here. Think about the feet getting as wide as you can get them and balancing the weight distribution between the heels and the toe mounts. And then let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Eventually finding mountain and bringing our hands together, heart center. As you get to heart center, pay attention to what's going on in the shoulders. Let's try to relax the shoulder girdle both down and back so that we get some space across the collarbone and pull some fluidity into our breath from that additional space. And then instead of thinking about the depth of the step back, think about the width across the collarbone as you slide your left foot back. So as you get back into this lunged shape, worry more about how you're respirating and how open you are across the shoulder girdle, how relaxed you are in the shoulders. And then let's just smooth our way into that front quad. So we take this space and we just give some depth, and then we'll step forward. And find mountain once again, and relax once again, and draw the collarbones wide once again, and draw the respiration in, and feel that space. And then same thing, our awareness is on this space. As we step our right foot back, we just land and breathe and feel the ease here. And then from that ease, we smooth our way to the front leg. We keep the tibia fibia nice and vertical. We keep the capacity in the lungs. And then when it feels appropriate, let's step forward. Find mountain. Drop our hands behind us if that's accessible. If it's not accessible to get your hands behind you, just take the hands to the sides of the pants. If we can interlace the fingers, let's do that. And then we're going to lift our chin towards the ceiling. And as you lift the chin, think about rolling the anterior corner of your shoulder up and back. And then push the thumbs down. And then return your head to neutral. And as the head comes back to neutral, we get more slack in the system. Allow the thumbs to capture that space. And let's take a half fold. We'll just exhale to a half fold. Crown of the head extends out towards the front of your room, gazes straight down. And then release your hands straight down, zombie style. And then follow the hands into the fold. And try to feel the thoracic shelf just open as you release down, as gravity starts to interplay with this expansion. And then let's walk our way back into down dog. Capturing our nice full capacity to breathe once again. Come down to hands and knees tabletop. We'll flip the tops of the feet and sink our way back into child's pose. And we just land and ground and feel the space here. After some time, too much time, she gets up. She picks her bike up and puts it on her shoulder, and she carries the back tire, back wheel. And she walks home, the bike frame pressing into the top of the shoulder structure. When she gets home, she kind of puts her bike down and she walks immediately into her bedroom. Doesn't turn on the light, just closes the door, lays down on her bed, and just starts bawling. Give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, let's bring our hands back in front of us if they're not already there. We'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way into down dog. We'll walk to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Lift your awareness to your sacrum. Let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming all the way up into mountain. Bring our hands together, heart center. And then let's heel toe our feet out to the width of the mat. So we're a little bit wider than shoulder width, depending on your mat width. Your shoulder width to a little bit wider. And we're gonna try to maintain this lower body dimensionality. So as you step your left foot back, try to think about being lined up on the edge of the mat and try to keep that right foot lined up on the edge of the right edge of the mat. And let's take our hands to our hips. And then we're thinking about bringing engagement into the core. Super easy when we're wide like this to bow out into the belly. So core locks back. And once we get the core to lock back, push the elbows back just slightly, like we're trying to bring that shoulder space in, and then smooth towards that front quad. Pretty hard work for the core here. Like pretty intense focus to maintain this neutral torso. And then sweep your arms up and overhead. Wide, modified crescent. And then drop your hands and we'll step back to the full width of the mat. And maybe allow the hips to sway a little laterally. And then when it feels appropriate, do the same thing to the second side. Left foot, right foot slides back, sorry. Right foot slides back. And we land there. And we think about the width. Drop the hands to the hips. Get that core engagement. Draw this verticality of the torso. And then smooth your way forward. Keep that torso verticality as a primary focus, and then sweep your arms up. And when you feel balanced left to right, we'll drop the hands and step back to our full width, give a little lateral sway. Feel how different the hip response is to our customary crescent. And then sweep the arms up and overhead. And we'll exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. We'll walk our way into down dog. Now, you can keep your feet at mat width here if that feels accessible to you. You can also bring them back to a more traditional width. Your choice. Think about what's the most impactful for you. And just make a determination based upon that. And then we're going to come down to hands and knees tabletop. And once again, you can stay with knees at mat width and slide back into child's pose, or you can come back to a more traditional width here. Maybe put the benefit just behind the comfort in your knee. You want to make sure that the knees are comfortable as your primary emphasis. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. She emerges maybe an hour later, maybe more. And she immediately picks up the phone and she starts calling her friends. And she's beyond appreciative to how well this call is received by her social circle. When it feels appropriate for you, let's let our hands slide in front of us. If they're not already there, we'll pull ourselves forward, 2 hands and knees tabletop. And here, no matter where your knees have been, let's bring them out to mat width. So we get into a wide version of tabletop. And then keep your hands at a more traditional, like 2.5 fist distance. Curl your toes, lift your seat, and roll yourself back in this modified, wider version of down dog. Really think about driving the hips back here. Remember, the knees can bend to allow for the space for spinal column expansion. Let's walk our way to the front of the mat. Inhaling into half lift. Exhaling back into fold. Drifting your awareness to your sacrum and rolling or sweeping your way up into mountain. Take your feet out to the width of the mat if they've found their way to a more narrow distance. And let's slide our left foot straight back so that it is mat width E. And then we're going to ground the left heel and spin that foot down. Now, we're in a much more demanding, likely feels more demanding to get this external rotation of the hips. But think about squaring all the way up with the torso and feel how activated that medial line of the front leg becomes as you blossom your way out into this modified version of Warrior 2. Feels very different. Feels almost like it's amazing that we're 6 inches over for how different this feels. It doesn't feel like a Warrior 2. And a lot of that is the amount of emphasis on this medial edge here. And then spin your left heel up and find this wide version of crescent. And then drop your hands down to the mat, middle of the mat. So they come down at that roughly 2.5 fist distance mark. And drive energy into that left heel. And then use your hands as a point of balance to step your left foot forward. And inhale to half lift. Exhale back into fold. Roll or sweep your way into this wide version of mountain. Hands coming together at heart center. Little ease back into the body as you get into this top space. And we're sliding our right foot straight back, mat width, grounding the right heel, rolling into this very unique, very modified version of 2. Make sure that left leg is not collapsing in, that we're staying in the external rotation energy. And just think about how different this feels as we square up the torso. I should have really cued that torso square up. Make sure you're squared up. And then we'll spin our right heel up and find crescent. Float the hands down to the mat. Traditional width there. Use the hands to help you step the right foot forward. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let the hands find the legs here. So this can be the thighs, the calves, the ankles, the heels, but hands to legs, and relax the head towards the floor. And then let's drift our awareness to our sacrum. We'll roll or sweep our way into mountain. Bring our hands together, heart center. And then heel toeing the feet back to a traditional width. And just as the feet come back into this traditional width, feel how much easier this is to feel integrated. And slide your left foot straight back into lunge. Ground your left heel and just roll open into two. And what we're trying to feel here is just the amount of space we now have in two. The capacity for ease in the external rotation on the front leg, the capacity to sink the torso down into the depth of the shape. Left heel spins up, we're into crescent. Drop the hands and return to our traditional mountain. Do this to the second side. Right foot slides straight back. Right heel grounds, we roll to two. Easy, fluid, spacious. Think about the openness on the front leg, but think about how you can use the space to sink into depth. And then right heel spins up, crescent. Drop the hands and we'll step to the front of the mat. Big, deep exhale breath. Sweep your arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. Let's walk to down dog. Drive towards the calcaneus bone on the heels here and really think about energizing the heels down. Even if that means bending the knees or doing the dreaded thing of walking the hands back some. Think about heels down for a moment. Doesn't mean they're touching the mat. It just means we're energizing them down. And then come down to hands and knees tabletop. Flip the tops of the feet and let's sink back into child's pose once again. Let the quads really unwind here. Think about how you can relax enough so that the blood flow in the legs starts to normalize, so that we feel that circulatory normalization, that respiratory normalization. The first 5 calls she makes in a row, I'll recommend the same thing. I say, you have to go see this old yogi guru. Lives out by the river. He lives alone. He's ancient, but he's brilliant. And she just keeps telling the same story. She just feels like life is overwhelming. Like everything is too much, like a bike flat. A simple thing for her on most days is enough to just crush her. And everybody keeps saying the same thing. You got to go see this guy. You got to go see this guy. You got to go see this guy. So she has no other choice. She has to go see this guy. And so that's exactly what she does. She rides her bike out and just every fictional guru, he's waiting as if he knew she was going to arrive, as if the story could lead no other way. And he greets her. She jumps off the bike. And he welcomes her into the backyard. It's this beautiful garden that overlooks this bend in the river. 15 more seconds here. Feeling that circulatory regeneration of the lower body. And when it feels appropriate for you, let's let our hands slide in front of us if they're not already. And we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Curl your toes, lift your seat, and roll your way back into down dog. Settle into the depth that you have available in your down dog. And then let's walk our way forward to the front of the mat. We'll inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Roll or sweep our way into mountain. As you get in the mountain, heel toe your feet as close together as you can comfortably get them, so that the medial edges of both legs are as close in proximity as we can comfortably place them. And we're going to think about sliding the left foot back so that it lands behind the right. So you can kind of feel where you need to go. And then we're going to slide all the way back. And we want to think about being on a tightrope here. So we present ourselves with a very different challenge than we presented ourselves in those wider things. Now we have the necessity to balance a little bit more. And we're going to create that same neutral torso, then sweep our arms to crescent. And then bring your hands back down to heart center. And take the hands from heart center just out kind of shoulder width. Palms facing towards the front of the room, just to allow you a little bit of balance capacity. And let's offer a little lateral sway through the hips, just to test our body's ability to balance on a tightrope. And then we'll step forward. Find mountain. And as you come back into mountain and we have this tighter proximity, think about where the hips are providing feedback and how different that feedback might be to what they had done previously. And then we're gonna do the same thing with the right foot. It's gonna step behind the left so that we end up tight-roped and we create our position, our balance, our stability, and we'll sweep the arms into crescent. Think about that vertical, neutral torso. And then we'll bring our hands to heart center and take the arms out kind of towards shoulderish so that they can provide a little balance as we just sway the hips a little bit here. Just test our body's ability to balance. And then when it feels appropriate, hands back to heart center. Let's step back to the front of the mat. And as you come into this tighter version of mountain, think about the hip flexors and relaxing any tension there. Let's sweep the arms up and overhead and exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Then your hands will walk into down dog. You can stay in this tighter version of down dog if that feels acceptable to you. Well, it doesn't have to be. Let's come down to hands and knees, tabletop. One last time. This will be the last time. So if it's possible for you to keep the legs together and slide back into child's pose, do that. If that doesn't feel right for the knees or the hips, then put them in a more comfortable placement. This will be our last child's pose of practice. So a little settle, a little ease, a little capacity to respirate. So as this old yogi and this young woman look out over this yogi's beautiful garden and the bend in the river, she tells him all of the problems she's having, how she's feeling overwhelmed in life, how the smallest things are sending her spiraling, how when she's in her yoga practice, she's distracted by things off the mat, and how even after practice, she still feels like she's spiraling, and how she wants to find a solution for that problem. And the yogi says something along the lines of like, you want to develop an endurance for life, a stamina for life. And she's like, yes, exactly. That is exactly what I want. When it feels appropriate for you, let the hands slide out in front of you. Let's pull ourselves forward, 2 hands and knees tabletop, and then we'll extend our legs straight out in front of us for a little staff. And as the legs extend, let's follow them forward into a fold. And so he says, okay, yeah. You need to develop strength for life. He says, okay. I want you to think about all of the future challenges that you might have in your life. And she's like, oh, okay. And she starts thinking about things in the future that might be challenging, changing a job or obstacles that might pop up, relationship struggles, connections that move on or pass on. And he says, now I want you to go down to the river. And I want you to gather a stone for every single challenge that you will face for the rest of your life. And she starts to run off, and he's like, whoa, hold on. Points over to this table. And on the table, there's an hourglass and a huge metal basket. He says, before you start, I want you to turn that hourglass over. There's an hour's worth of sand in that glass. And every stone that you collect, I want you to place in that metal basket. And before the last grain of sand falls from the hourglass, you need to prove to yourself that you're strong enough to pick up that basket and all of the problems that will arise in your future. And if you do that, there will be no doubt you will be strong enough to withstand anything and everything that happens in your life that is a challenge. And she starts to run straight down to the river, and he's like, the hourglass. She like shakes that off. She runs over the hourglass. She turns it over. The sand starts to fall, and she sprints down to the river. Give herself just 30 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate for you, we're going to bring ourselves back up into a nice neutral staff. And then let's bring the bottoms of the feet together. And let your hands clasp where it feels most comfortable, either over the toe mounds or on the ankles or the shins, whatever gives you the most capacity here. And then find your way forward towards a fold. Now, this fold asks a lot of our hips, asks a lot of our quadratus lumborum musculature, That's a lot of the musculature tying into the sacrum. And for most of us, this will be a pretty challenging forward fold. One thing that can help gather some space, focusing on the exhale, and also a little lateral rocking. Kind of enough to free up the body's ability to release, to relax. And we're not going to be here for super duper long, but we will give ourselves another 60 seconds. So she runs down to the river and she reaches in as her hand strikes the water. It's shockingly cold. But her hand goes straight down to the bottom and it picks up this stone that is just like, it's flat, but it's nearly perfectly round. And it fits perfectly in the palm of her hand. And almost the moment that her hand touches that stone, she's hit with this like future, okay, I'm going to have to fix flat tires. I ride my bike everywhere. This will be a part of my life. And it's like, it was like imbibed in that stone. That is the problem associated with this stone. She picks it up and she feels it for a second. And then she remembers the hourglass, puts it in her pocket. And she reaches down and she grabs another stone. And as she grabs that stone, she's hit with another problem she's going to experience in the future. And again, it's about palm size, maybe a little bit smaller. Once her pockets are full, she runs back up and dumps them out into this metal basket. And they drop in with this loud clang. And she looks at the hourglass and there's plenty of time left, but she sprints back down to the river. Last 10 seconds here. When it feels appropriate for you, we'll bring our torso back up towards vertical. And let the hands now find the shins. We want to have something we can grip onto. And then imagine that you're using the engagement of the hands to help broaden out the collarbones and draw the crown of the head as high towards the ceiling as you can. And just take a round of breath. Full vertical torso, fully engaged spine, full respiration. And one more time, let's extend our legs out in front of us. We'll follow that forward into a fold. Just 60 seconds here. Remember the capacity to relax into the exhale, to expand into the fold. So over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, she repeats this process. She runs to the river. She feels the shockingly cold water. She reaches in. She connects with a stone. It is like that stone imprints a future problem she's going to have. She puts that in her pocket, and then she eventually carries those stones back up to the metal basket. And with 15 minutes or so left on the hourglass, she's looking at this metal basket and it's filling up. And the sand is obviously dwindling down. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our spine to vertical one more time, and then we'll lower ourselves onto our back. We just let our body relax here. Feel all of the hip release, the spinal column release, the supportive musculature release. Let your body be at ease. There's a little bit of anxiety that starts to build as the sand is dwindling away. She's running back down and she knows she needs to get as many stones as she can. So she starts grabbing smaller and smaller stones. She starts grabbing them by the handful. She starts filling her pockets quicker and quicker. And her trips start to get a little bit more frantic. But now she's just pulling as much as she can. And she's losing that individual connection with the stone, but she knows she needs to get as many stones as she can into this basket. When it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees into a bent position if they're not already in a bent position. And then let's let the knees start to sway a little bit. A little bit of dynamic exploration here. We don't have a ton of time, but try to work in all the movement, all the rotational movement that your body is going to need. We were pretty exceptionally linear in practice tonight. So really let these twists be fully exploratory. Don't feel like they need to be rushed. Maybe one more time in each direction. Eventually, no rush to make this true, but we'll eventually come back to knees pointing towards the ceiling or sky. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and let the knees fall out wide for just one real quick final reset of the sacrum. And when it feels appropriate for you, as it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees back together. We'll ask ourselves if there's anything that we want, need, can benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer that to ourselves. If we have everything we want, we have everything we need, if we have everything we could have, let's find our way into a shape where we can appreciate some stillness. So with maybe a minute or so left in sand in the hourglass, she stops bringing rocks up. She gets up and she sits in front of this basket and she knows that she has to lift this basket. She looks at the thing and she feels her breath kind of heaving. She makes a conscious decision. She's going to slow things down. She's going to reset her nervous system, reset her respiration, let her muscles relax. And then she's going to give herself 15 seconds and she's going to lift with all her might. She's going to lift this thing. And so she does that for 45 seconds. She just calms down. It's as relaxed and as at ease as she can be. And then with just maybe 15 seconds of sand left in this hourglass, she puts her hands on the handles of this basket. And she starts to pull with every bit of energy, of strength, of might, of determination that she has. Just fully, deeply reset your virtual selves. She pulls. Cannot get this basket to move. And she's pulling with all her might as the last grain of sand falls from the hourglass. And as it hits that pile of sand in the lower half, she lets go. She gives up. And she crumbles. And almost supernaturally, this old ancient yogi appears. He's like, ah, you couldn't lift the basket. And then he kicks the leg of the table this basket is sitting on. And the table collapses and the basket falls and spills out. And he reaches down and he grabs this perfectly round rock that's just the size of his palm and he hands it to her and he says, can you lift this rock? She says, yeah, of course. This rock is very light, but that basket, all of my future problems, they're too heavy. And he just smiles at her. Let's start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. Into our wrists and our ankles. Let that movement carry up through the arms, into the elbows, up the legs, into the knees. Traveling into the shoulders and the hips, the back, the neck, the head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, your whole body moves, and we utilize that movement to transition from the shape we are in back into a seat. And the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. Bring our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself one of the most beautiful aspects in life is that we can only deal with things one moment at a time, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste.